Little homeless girl finds man tied up on street. What she tells police leaves everyone in shock. Max's ears pricked forward before Sarah Collins even heard the footsteps. Through the cruiser's rearview mirror, she watched her K9 partner shift from relaxed to alert in a heartbeat. 6 years of partnership had taught her to trust those subtle changes. They'd saved her life more times than she cared to count. A small figure burst from the shadows of Atlanta's industrial district, hands slapping against the driver's window. Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward her weapon, but Max's posture suggested urgency rather than threat. The girl couldn't have been more than 9, her dark eyes wide with panic, clothes worn, but clean. "Officer, please." The girl's breath fogged the glass. "There's a man. He's tied up in the alley. He looks hurt." Sarah stepped out, keeping one hand near her holster. The setting sun painted long shadows between the warehouses, turning familiar territory into a maze of dark corners and blind spots. Max jumped from the back seat, his nails clicking against the asphalt as he took position beside her. "Show me," Sarah said, noting how Max's attention kept shifting to their surroundings rather than following the girl's pointing finger. That was the first warning sign. The girl, Maria she'd learn later, led them down a narrow passage between 2 abandoned buildings. The stench of rotting garbage and stale urine filled the air, but Max wasn't interested in the usual alley distractions. His focus was laser-sharp, though not on their destination. "There," Maria whispered, pointing to a crumpled form about 30 feet ahead. The man lay face down, hands apparently bound behind his back with dirty rope. His clothes were expensive but muddy, suggesting days of captivity. But something felt off. Sarah had worked enough kidnapping cases to recognize the signs. The bonds were too loose, the body position too carefully arranged, the lack of struggle marks on visible skin. Max confirmed her suspicions by completely ignoring the victim. Instead, he stared intently at a dark van parked at the alley's far end, his muscles coiled tight beneath his tactical vest. "Maria, I need you to slowly back up toward the street," Sarah whispered, her training kicking in as pieces clicked into place. "Stay behind that dumpster, and don't move until I say so." The girl's eyes widened with understanding, and she retreated quietly. Sarah reached for her radio, but before she could call for backup, the unconscious man moved with practiced precision. Marcus Wheeler, though she didn't know his name yet, rolled to his feet with a fighter's grace, a matte black pistol appearing in his hand. But Max was already moving, 6 years of training and instinct launching him forward like a guided missile. Wheeler managed to squeeze off one shot, the bullet harmlessly embedding itself in the brick wall as Max's jaws clamped around his gun arm. Sarah drew her weapon, scanning for additional threats as the van's doors burst open. 2 men emerged with automatic weapons, but they'd underestimated the response time of Atlanta PD. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Wheeler's backup hesitated, torn between fighting and fleeing. That moment of indecision cost them everything. "Atlanta police, drop your weapons!" Sarah's voice carried the authority of someone who'd faced down worse odds. Max maintained his hold on Wheeler, who'd stopped struggling after realizing the K9's bite could easily shift from arm to throat. The next few minutes passed in controlled chaos as backup units swarmed the scene. But it was what they found in the van that turned a failed ambush into something much darker. Laptops filled with surveillance photos of police officers, detailed schedules of patrol routes, and documents suggesting a network of corruption that reached into the department itself. Sarah found Maria still crouched behind the dumpster, shaking but unharmed. Max, after helping secure Wheeler, padded over to the girl and gently nudged her hand with his nose, a gesture so unlike his usual professional demeanor that it made Sarah pause. "You did good, kid," Sarah said, draping her jacket over Maria's shoulders, "but I need you to tell me exactly how you found him. Every detail matters." As Maria began to speak, Sarah noticed Max's attention drawn to one of the responding officers, Detective James Morrison, recently transferred from Chicago. The hair on Max's neck stood slightly raised, a reaction Sarah had learned to take seriously. Wheeler was led away in cuffs, but his smirk suggested this was far from over. Sarah watched him disappear into a patrol car, her mind already connecting dots she wished she couldn't see. The rope marks on his wrists were self-inflicted, the kind used to lure compassionate cops into an ambush. But why target regular patrol officers when there were higher-value marks? Unless this wasn't about targeting cops at all. Unless this was about testing them. Maria's small voice cut through Sarah's thoughts. He was watching the police station yesterday, the man who was tied up. I saw him sitting in the van taking pictures. Sarah felt the weight of her badge grow heavier. A child's observation had just blown the case wide open, but it also meant Maria was now a witness, and if Wheeler was connected enough to have cops on his payroll, no one was truly safe. Max pressed against her leg, a solid reminder that she wasn't facing this alone. Together, they'd brought down drug cartels and stopped terrorist threats. But this felt different. This felt personal. Looking down at Maria, then at the evidence being catalogued from the van, Sarah made a decision that would change all their lives. This wouldn't be just another case file. This time she would tear down the whole corrupt system, no matter how high it went. She just hoped she'd live long enough to finish what they'd started. The fluorescent lights of Atlanta PD's evidence room cast harsh shadows across the documents spread before Sarah. 3 hours of sorting through Wheeler's seized laptops had left her with a tension headache and a growing sense of dread. Max lay at her feet, but his ears kept twitching toward the door, a subtle warning that they weren't as alone as they seemed. "Look at this," Sarah murmured, sliding a photograph across the table to Detective Lisa Martinez, one of the few colleagues she still trusted completely. The image showed a cargo container being unloaded at the port, time-stamped 3 months ago. Nothing suspicious, except for the customs officer in the frame. That's Richard Chen. He was found dead in his apartment 2 weeks later, ruled a suicide. Martinez leaned closer, her expression hardening. Suicide with 2 shots to the back of the head? That case stank from the start, but Internal Affairs shut down my investigation. Max suddenly lifted his head, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Seconds later, Detective James Morrison appeared in the doorway, his practiced smile never reaching his eyes. "Ladies," he nodded, grabbing a case file from a nearby shelf. "Working late?" Sarah casually slid the photo under a stack of papers, but not before noticing how Morrison's gaze lingered on the evidence boxes labeled with Wheeler's case number. Max's growl deepened slightly, a sound Sarah had learned to trust more than any human intuition. After Morrison left, Martinez whispered, "Your dog's never liked him, has he?" "Max doesn't trust badges," Sarah replied, scratching behind her partner's ears. "He trusts actions." The next document made her blood run cold. It was a police report from 18 months ago, detailing a raid on a suspected trafficking operation. The raid had failed, the building empty when SWAT arrived. The authorizing signature at the bottom belonged to James Morrison. Sarah pulled up 3 more failed raids from her computer, each following the same pattern. Tips would come in about human trafficking operations. Morrison would delay the warrant just long enough, and the targets would vanish hours before police arrived. "This goes deeper than Wheeler," Martinez said, her voice barely audible above the hum of fluorescent lights. "Someone's been protecting his operation from inside the department." A notification popped up on Sarah's phone, the lab results from Wheeler's van. The fingerprints on the steering wheel matched those found at Chen's suicide scene. But it was another detail that caught her attention. Traces of a distinctive industrial cleaner used exclusively at one of Atlanta's largest ports. Max stood suddenly, his body tense. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Multiple sets, trying to move quietly. Sarah switched off her computer screen just as Morrison reappeared, this time with 2 other detectives she didn't recognize. "Still here, Collins?" Morrison's tone was casual, but his stance screamed predator. "Dedicated, aren't you?" "Just finishing up," Sarah replied, gathering her papers. She could feel Max positioning himself between her and the door, his training and protective instincts working in perfect harmony. "You should be careful." Morrison said, blocking their exit. Some cases can be dangerous for ambitious officers, especially ones who don't know when to stop digging. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Sarah met his gaze steadily, feeling the weight of her backup weapon against her ankle. Funny thing about K9 officers, Morrison. We're trained to dig until we find what we're looking for. The standoff lasted several heartbeats before Morrison stepped aside. As Sarah and Max walked past, she heard him make a call. Yeah, it's me. We might have a problem. In her car, Sarah finally let out a shaky breath. Max nuzzled her hand, his presence grounding her racing thoughts. The port connection was their best lead, but Morrison's warning had been clear. Keep pushing, and she might end up like Chen. Her phone buzzed with a text from Martinez. Storage unit in Chen's name just cleared out. Someone's destroying evidence. Sarah started the engine, checking her mirrors for tails. They had maybe hours before the trail went cold. Protocol demanded she take this to internal affairs, build a proper case. But protocol hadn't saved Chen, and it wouldn't save the next victim. Max's ears perked up as she turned toward the port district. In the growing darkness, the industrial coastline looked like a maze of shadows and steel. Somewhere in those shadows, Wheeler's operation was still running. And now Sarah knew why their ambush had failed. They hadn't been testing cops for weakness. They'd been identifying threats to eliminate. Her dashboard clock read 9:47 p.m. The night shift at the port would be minimal, security focused on the main gates rather than the maze of storage units and abandoned offices. Perfect cover for anything you didn't want found. What do you say, partner? Sarah glanced at Max in the rearview mirror. Ready to do some digging? Max's determined bark was all the answer she needed. They'd stopped terrorist threats and taken down drug cartels together, but this felt different. This time, the enemies weren't just criminals. They were wearing the same badge she'd sworn to honor. As she parked in a shadowy corner of the port's access road, Sarah checked her weapon and vest. She didn't know if they'd find answers tonight, but she knew one thing. By morning, either she'd have proof of Morrison's corruption, or she'd join Chen in the growing list of suicides that asked too many questions. The port's security lights cast long shadows across the concrete as Sarah and Max moved silently between containers. Somewhere in this maze of steel and secrets, answers waited. And if Morrison's reaction was any indication, those answers could tear the department apart. The scar on Sarah's left shoulder burned as she crouched behind a shipping container, phantom pain triggered by memories she'd rather forget. 5 years ago, she'd hidden behind a similar barrier, listening to her partner Thomas Reed's final breaths over the radio while backup failed to arrive. Max pressed against her leg, his warmth anchoring her to the present. He might not have been there that night, but somehow he always knew when the memories surfaced. The port's security lights cast strange shadows across his tactical vest, the reflective K9 patches glowing like beacons in the dark. I know, buddy, she whispered, checking her weapon. This time's different. A metallic clang echoed through the maze of containers, followed by voices. Sarah signaled Max to stay, edging closer to the sound. Through gaps between the containers, she caught glimpses of men unloading crates from a truck, standard port activity, except for the armed guards in the late hour. Her phone vibrated silently, a message from Martinez. Morrison just pulled your personnel file, looking into the Reed case. Sarah's jaw tightened. That case had been her obsession before Max, back when she still believed the department's official story about a drug bust gone wrong. But drug dealers don't carry military-grade weapons, and they don't know patrol routes by heart. The night that changed everything started much like this one. Reed had insisted on checking out an anonymous tip about drug shipments at the port. Sometimes you gotta trust your gut, Collins, he'd said, flashing that confident smile that made rookie officers trust him instantly. They'd separated to cover more ground. Standard procedure. Terrible mistake. The ambush was professional, coordinated. Reed managed one transmission. Collins, it's a trap! There... Static swallowed the rest. Sarah took 2 rounds trying to reach him. The backup she called never arrived. When SWAT finally showed up 40 minutes later, Reed was dead, and the shooters had vanished along with any evidence of their operation. A sharp bark yanked her back to the present. Max had found something, his training overriding her hand signal to stay quiet. Sarah rounded the corner, weapon ready, and froze. The storage unit's door hung open, spilling fluorescent light onto the concrete. Inside, amid stacks of shipping manifests and computer equipment, a familiar face stared back from an evidence board. Thomas Reed, connected by red string to surveillance photos spanning 5 years. "Beautiful work, isn't it?" Morrison's voice came from behind her. Reed was building quite the case before he got sloppy. Sarah spun, but 2 men already had weapons trained on her. Max growled, muscles coiled to strike, but Morrison's next words stopped them both cold. "I wouldn't," he said, nodding to a sniper's laser sight dancing on Max's vest. "Good dogs are hard to replace." "Reed was investigating you," Sarah said, pieces clicking into place. "The failed drug bust, the delayed backup. It was all you." Morrison smiled, but his eyes remained dead. "Reed was idealistic, like you. Thought he could clean up the department single-handed. Never understood that corruption isn't the disease, Collins. It's the symptom. This city runs on money and influence, and someone has to manage the flow. By trafficking human beings." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. "By maintaining order," Morrison corrected. "Wheeler provides a service. Politicians get their bribes, criminals get their territory, and everyone knows their place. Reed couldn't accept that, just like you can't." Sarah's mind raced. 5 years of questions finally had answers, but they might die with her if she couldn't find a way out. Max inched closer to her leg, waiting for the signal they'd practiced countless times. "That night," she said, playing for time, "you were the one who took the call. You made sure backup never came." Morrison holstered his weapon, confident in his men's coverage. Reed was going to expose everything. Names, dates, payoffs, evidence that went all the way to the mayor's office. Couldn't let that happen. And Chen, the customs officer, got curious about manifests that didn't match his records. Tragic suicide. Morrison stepped closer. "Just like yours will be." The dedicated officer, consumed by her partner's death, finally unable to bear the guilt. Sarah felt Max's muscles tense against her leg. One word, and he'd tear out Morrison's throat. But the sniper would drop him before he made it halfway. She needed a better plan. "Why tell me all this?" she asked, hand inching toward her backup weapon. "Professional courtesy. You were a good cop, Collins, and now you'll be a useful example to others who might get ambitious." A distant crash echoed through the port. Morrison's men turned slightly toward the sound, the opening she needed. Sarah dropped as Max lunged forward, not at Morrison, but at the gunman on the left. The sniper's shot went wide as Sarah rolled, drawing her backup piece and firing in one motion. Morrison disappeared into the shadows as his men fell. Sarah's shoulder blazed with familiar fire, but this time was different. This time she had proof, and she had Max. Her phone chirped. Martinez again. "SWAT's 5 minutes out. Surveillance feed shows Morrison heading for the administrative building. You okay?" Sarah checked Max, relieved to find him unharmed. The evidence board gleamed under fluorescent lights. 5 years of secrets finally exposed. But Morrison was escaping, probably to destroy more evidence. "Max," she whispered. "Find him." Her partner's ears pricked forward, nose already searching for Morrison's scent. Together, they moved into the darkness, leaving Reed's photo behind. Some ghosts could only rest when justice was finally served. In the distance, a door slammed. Max's head snapped toward the sound, muscles tense with purpose. Sarah checked her weapons magazine, then nodded to her partner. This time, backup would arrive. This time, the truth wouldn't die in the shadows. This time, she wasn't alone. Sarah's radio crackled to life as she and Max tracked Morrison through the port's administrative section. "Collins, you need to see this." Martinez's voice was tight with urgency. "Wheeler's men just grabbed Maria from the safe house." The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah had placed the girl there herself, with trusted officers she'd personally vetted. How? Security footage shows Judge Patterson signing her out, called it an emergency foster placement. He's on Wheeler's payroll. Max's ears twitched at the change in Sarah's breathing pattern. The Belgian Malinois had learned to read her subtle stress signals over their years together, just as she'd learned to trust his instincts. Right now, those instincts had them heading toward the port's central office building. Maria's description matches a girl Wheeler's crew just brought in, Martinez continued. Loading Dock C, blue shipping container. SWAT's 15 minutes out. Sarah checked her watch. 11:42 p.m. The container ships wouldn't start moving until dawn, but Wheeler's operation wasn't known for keeping witnesses alive. Tell SWAT we don't have 15 minutes. She clicked off the radio, kneeling beside Max. Find Morrison first, she whispered. He'll lead us to Wheeler. Max lowered his head, tracking the scent. The administrative building loomed ahead, its glass facade reflecting the port's security lights. A figure moved past a second-floor window. Morrison heading toward the secure document room. Sarah's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. The attached photo showed Maria, terrified but alive, held at gunpoint by one of Wheeler's men. The message was simple. Walk away or she dies. Max whined softly, picking up on her tension. Sarah scratched behind his ears, buying a moment to think. Standard procedure would be to wait for SWAT, set up a perimeter, negotiate. But procedure hadn't saved Thomas Reed, and it wouldn't save Maria. Let's move, partner. They entered through a service door, Max leading the way. The building's night lighting cast odd shadows across empty cubicles and silent copy machines. Sarah's boots were silent on the carpet, but Max's nails clicked faintly, despite his careful steps. A drawer slammed somewhere above them. Max's head snapped toward the sound, but Sarah held him back. The stairs would be watched. Instead, she led them to the elevator shaft, where maintenance access would give them a silent approach. Climbing the service ladder, Sarah felt her wounded shoulder protest. The phantom pain from her old injury mixed with fresh bruises from tonight's fight. Max waited at the second-floor access door, perfectly still except for his quivering nose. Sarah eased the door open. The secure document room was just ahead, light spilling from its partially open door. Morrison's voice drifted out, urgent and angry. Wheeler wants everything gone. No, I don't care about the girl. Just get those ships moving early. Nothing can tie us to... Max's growl cut through the night. Sarah cursed silently. He'd caught Wheeler's scent from somewhere nearby, which meant Maria was closer than they'd thought. Morrison appeared in the doorway, phone still at his ear. His eyes widened at the sight of Sarah's raised weapon. Collins? How? He dove back inside as Sarah fired, glass shattering somewhere in the darkness. Run all you want, Sarah called out, moving to cover the room's other exit. SWAT's already on the way. It's over. Morrison's laugh echoed from inside. You still don't get it, do you? By the time SWAT arrives, that container will be on a ship to international waters, along with your little witness. A metallic clang resonated through the building's central atrium, a loading dock door opening. Max's ears pricked forward, his body tensing toward the sound. Sarah made a split-second decision. Find the girl, she whispered. Max hesitated, torn between his training to stay with his handler and the command to track. Go! The Belgian Malinois vanished into the shadows as Sarah focused on Morrison. You know what your mistake was? She asked, edging closer to the document room. Same as Reed's killers. You underestimated loyalty. Loyalty? Morrison scoffed. To what? A system that runs on bribes? A department that looks the other way? To the oath we took. Sarah rounded the corner, weapon ready. To protect the innocent. The document room was empty, papers still burning in a metal trash can. The window behind the desk was open, cool night air carrying the sound of running feet on the fire escape. Sarah's radio crackled. Collins! Max found her! Loading Dock C, but Wheeler's men are... The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Through the open window, a girl's scream pierced the night. Sarah looked at the fire escape, then at the burning evidence of Morrison's crimes. Chase the dirty cop or save the girl? No choice at all. She ran for the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. Her shoulder burned, her lungs ached, but none of that mattered. Somewhere in the maze of containers and shadows, Max was alone with Wheeler's crew. Somewhere in this concrete jungle, an innocent girl needed help. Martin's laughter echoed from the fire escape. "Better hurry, Collins. Clock's ticking." Sarah burst through the stairwell door into the port's night air. Ahead, the loading dock's floodlights illuminated a scene from her nightmares. Maria struggling against Wheeler's men, Max holding them at bay, and Morrison raising a weapon toward her partner's exposed back. Time slowed, choices crystallized, and Sarah Collins made the decision that would change everything. Sarah's first shot caught Morrison in the shoulder, spinning him away from Max. Her second struck the floodlight above Wheeler's men, plunging half the loading dock into shadow. In the chaos that followed, Max's training took over. He launched himself at the nearest threat, powerful jaws clamping down on the arm holding Maria. The girl broke free, darting behind a stack of pallets as gunfire erupted across the dock. Sarah rolled behind a forklift, returning fire while scanning for Morrison. Through the maze of containers and machinery, she caught glimpses of Max herding Maria toward better cover, keeping his body between her and danger. "You're only making it worse, Collins," Morrison's voice echoed off metal walls. "Think about what you're throwing away. With your record, Wheeler could use someone like you." A bullet pinged off the forklift near Sarah's head. From her position, she could see 3 of Wheeler's men moving to flank her, while others worked to secure the container doors. They were trying to load Maria before SWAT arrived. "Like you used Reed?" Sarah called back, buying time as she assessed her options. "Was that the same offer you made him?" Reed was weak, too idealistic. Morrison's voice was closer now. "But you're a survivor. You understand how the world really works." Max's bark rang out, a warning. Sarah dropped and rolled as Morrison emerged from behind a container, firing where she'd been a second before. But the move put her in the open, exposed to Wheeler's men. The first bullet caught her vest hard enough to knock the wind out of her. The second grazed her arm as she scrambled for cover. Through blurred vision, she saw Max break from Maria's side, torn between protecting the girl and helping his partner. "Stay!" Sarah commanded, her voice strained but firm. Max froze, whining but holding position. Wheeler's men were closing in, using the containers as cover. Soon they'd have both her and Maria cornered. Morrison approached slowly, weapon trained on Sarah's position. "Last chance, Collins. Walk away. Take the money. Live to see tomorrow." Sarah checked her magazine. 3 rounds left, no backup piece. Her radio was silent. SWAT was still minutes away. The pain in her shoulder had gone from burning to numb, which she knew was a bad sign. Then she heard it. Maria's quiet sob from behind the pallets. The same sound of helpless fear she'd heard from countless victims over the years. The sound that had driven her to become a cop in the first place. "You want to know the difference between us, Morrison?" Sarah's voice was steady despite the pain. "You forgot why we wear the badge." She raised her weapon, but Morrison was faster. His shot would have been clean if Max hadn't chosen that exact moment to disobey orders. The Belgian Malinois launched himself through the air, a shadow given purpose and fury. Morrison's bullet went wide as 80 pounds of highly trained K9 slammed into his chest. Sarah didn't waste the opening. She rose in one fluid motion, muscle memory from countless training sessions taking over. 2 shots dropped the nearest of Wheeler's men. The third caught Morrison in the leg as he struggled with Max, but there were too many targets, too many angles to cover. A bullet struck the container beside her head, another caught her already injured shoulder. She fell back, vision dimming at the edges. Through the haze of pain, she saw Wheeler himself emerge from the shadows, weapon raised. "Enough!" Wheeler's voice cut through the gunfire. "Drop it, Collins, or the girl dies first, then your dog." Sarah's weapon felt impossibly heavy. Max stood over Morrison, teeth bared but waiting for command. Maria watched from behind the pallets, tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her face. All the people Sarah had sworn to protect, all waiting for her next move. Wheeler's finger tightened on the trigger. "Choose," Officer Collins. Your pride or their lives. Time slowed. Sarah saw Reed's face in her mind, heard his last words about trusting her gut. She saw every victim she'd failed to save, every criminal who'd walked free because good cops looked the other way. She saw Max, loyal beyond reason, ready to die at her command. She saw her choice. Sarah Collins smiled, blood on her teeth. You forgot something, Wheeler. Yeah? What's that? I'm not the only one who called for backup. The first flashbang grenade turned night into day. The second sent Wheeler's men diving for cover as SWAT repelled from the catwalks above. The third caught Morrison trying to flee, sending him stumbling into the path of Martinez's team coming in from the west. Sarah's vision was fading, but she saw Wheeler raise his weapon one last time, not at her, but at Maria. With the last of her strength, she gave Max the command they'd trained for but never used. Max, end it! The Belgian Malinois moved like liquid shadow, faster than Wheeler could track. His jaws closed on the arm holding the weapon, and the sickening crack of breaking bone echoed across the loading dock. Wheeler's scream was cut short as Max drove him to the ground, holding him there with the terrible efficiency that made his breed legendary. SWAT secured the scene with mechanical precision. Martinez knelt beside Sarah, calling for medics. Through the chaos, Sarah heard Maria's voice. Is it over? Yeah, kid. Sarah's voice was weak but clear. It's over. Max returned to her side, blood on his muzzle but his eyes bright and alert. He settled beside her, pressing against her good shoulder the way he always did when she was hurt. His warmth anchored her as darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. The last thing Sarah Collins saw before consciousness faded was Morrison being led away in cuffs, Wheeler's men lined up against a container wall, and Maria safe in Martinez's arms. The last thing she felt was Max's steady presence, loyal to the end. The last thing she heard was Martinez reading Morrison his rights. You have the right to remain silent. Justice, Sarah thought as the world went dark, sometimes arrives on 4 legs instead of 2. The morning sun streamed through the hospital window, painting warm rectangles on Max's tactical vest where it hung beside Sarah's bed. 3 days had passed since the shootout at the port, and the Belgian Malinois hadn't left her side, except when Martinez took him out for quick walks. Sarah watched her partner dozing in the visitor's chair, his ears twitching at every nurse's footstep in the hallway. The doctors had called it a miracle that both bullets had missed anything vital. Max had his own guardian angel, not a single injury despite taking down both Morrison and Wheeler. A soft knock drew Max's attention. Martinez entered, carrying a thick case file and wearing a satisfied smile that suggested good news. Wheeler's singing like a bird, she announced, dropping into the empty chair. Turns out getting your arm reconstructed makes a man reconsider his loyalties. He's named every corrupt official, every dirty cop, every politician on his payroll. Sarah shifted carefully, mindful of her bandaged shoulder. Morrison, refusing to talk, but it doesn't matter. The evidence you found in that document room, most of it survived the fire. 5 years of detailed records, including... Martinez paused, pulling out a sealed evidence bag. This. Inside was a slightly charred notebook. Sarah recognized the handwriting immediately. Thomas Reed's characteristic slant, his habit of underlining important details twice. The diary documented everything he'd uncovered about Wheeler's operation, including Morrison's involvement in coordinating police protection. Reed knew, Sarah said softly. He knew how deep it went. Martinez nodded. That's why they killed him. But he was smarter than they realized. He made copies, hid them in different locations. The notebook we found was just one of 3. Max's head lifted suddenly, seconds before another knock at the door. Maria peeked in, her face breaking into a wide smile at the sight of the K9 officer. Behind her stood an older couple. The Hendersons, Sarah remembered from the background check she'd insisted on running. "Officer Collins!" Maria rushed to the bed, then stopped short, remembering Sarah's injuries. Max solved the dilemma by gently nudging the girl closer, making her giggle. "The adoption papers came through this morning," Mrs. Henderson said, her eyes warm. "We wanted you to be the first to know." Sarah felt something tight in her chest loosen. After everything Maria had witnessed, finding her a safe home had been priority one. The Hendersons had passed every background check with flying colors, and their connection to victims' advocacy groups meant they'd understand Maria's need for counseling after her ordeal. "Tell her the other news." Maria bounced on her toes, barely containing her excitement. Mr. Henderson smiled. "We're staying in Atlanta. The DA's office offered me a position heading up their new anti-trafficking task force. They said recent events highlighted the need for better oversight." Martinez's phone buzzed. She checked it, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine satisfaction. "Judge just denied Morrison's bail request. Wheeler too. They'll both be in federal custody until trial." "What about the others?" Sarah asked, thinking of the web of corruption Reed had died exposing. 17 arrests so far, including 3 more judges and Deputy Commissioner Rogers. The FBI's Public Corruption Unit is taking over, but they want to keep you and Max involved once you're back on duty. Something about unique investigative skills. Sarah scratched behind Max's ears, smiling as he leaned into her touch. "Hear that, partner? We're going federal." A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Through the door's window, they could see uniformed officers gathering around a TV mounted on the wall. Martinez turned up the volume on Sarah's room TV just in time to catch the breaking news. A major breakthrough in the investigation of corruption within Atlanta's legal system. Sources confirm that multiple high-ranking officials have been indicted following evidence uncovered during a Port Authority operation. Among those charged are prominent Judge William Patterson and police detective James Morrison, accused of facilitating a human trafficking network that operated through Atlanta's shipping channels. The reporter continued, but Sarah was watching Maria. The girl stood straighter, her chin lifted with the first hints of real confidence. "They can't hurt anyone else now, can they?" "No, sweetheart," Sarah assured her. "They can't." Later that evening, after the Hendersons had taken Maria home and Martinez had left with her files, Sarah found herself alone with Max. The pain medication was wearing off, but she welcomed the clarity it brought. She thought about Reed, about the price of loyalty and the weight of the badge. She thought about all the officers who'd chosen to look the other way, who'd convinced themselves that corruption was just part of the job. Max rested his head on her bed, his eyes never leaving her face. In those eyes, Sarah saw the same unwavering dedication that had drawn her to him during their first training session, the same loyalty that had saved both their lives at the port. "You know what, partner?" she said softly. "Reed was right about trusting your gut. He just didn't have you to watch his back." The Belgian Malinois' tail thumped against the chair. Outside, Atlanta's skyline caught the last rays of sunset, the city's lights beginning to twinkle like stars. Somewhere in those streets, other officers were starting their shifts, making their own choices about right and wrong, loyalty and betrayal. But in this quiet hospital room, a K-9 officer and her partner had already made their choice. They would continue to dig until they found the truth, continue to fight until justice was served. Not for the glory or the promotions, but for the simple reason that had drawn Sarah to the badge in the first place. Someone had to stand for those who couldn't stand for themselves. Max's ears pricked forward at the sound of footsteps in the hallway, the night nurse making her rounds. Sarah smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new cases, new challenges, new chances to make a difference. But for now, in this moment, justice had been served, and that was enough.